Sometimes, the smallest act of grace can break the hardest of hearts. Opening Oko Oka, there are moments in life when everything you've worked for hangs by a thread. When one decision, one encounter, one misunderstanding can unravel years of sacrifice. For Evelyn Parker, that moment came on a gray Tuesday morning, beneath a sky heavy with rain. On a roadside where mercy felt like a distant memory. She sat behind the wheel of her aging Honda Civic, hands trembling slightly as red and blue lights painted the interior of her car in flashes of dread. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. Outside, the officer's boots crunched against gravel, each step deliberate, each second stretching longer than the last. Evelyn wasn't a criminal. She wasn't reckless. She was a woman who had spent the last 15 years cleaning office buildings at night so her daughter could attend college during the day. She was a woman who knew every scratch on that car, every rattle in the engine, because she couldn't afford to replace it. She was a woman who had learned long ago that the world didn't always see her the way she saw herself, with dignity, with worth, with quiet, unshakable strength. The knock on her window came sharply. She rolled it down slowly, rain misting against her cheek. The officer, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved from stone and eyes that gave nothing away, leaned down slightly. His badge read Officer Daniels. His voice was flat, almost bored. License and registration. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she nodded. Yes, sir. Her hands fumbled through the glove compartment, fingers brushing past old receipts, a rosary her mother had given her, a photo of her daughter in a graduation cap. She found the documents and handed them over, her fingers brushing his briefly. He didn't seem to notice. He studied the papers in silence. The rain drummed against the roof. Somewhere in the distance, a semi-truck roared past, spraying water across the shoulder of the highway. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked, still not looking at her. Evelyn's mind raced. She had been careful. She always was. Her inspection was up to date. Her tags were current. She hadn't been speeding. She couldn't afford the ticket, couldn't afford the insurance hike. "No, sir," she said quietly. "I don't." He finally looked at her then, and something in his gaze, cold, dismissive, made her feel small. Not because she was, but because, in that moment, he wanted her to feel that way. "Your taillight's out," he said. "And your lane change back there?" Reckless. Didn't signal. Nearly caused an accident. Evelyn blinked. She had signaled. She was sure of it. And the taillight, she'd checked it just last week. "Sir, I'm not interested in excuses," he interrupted, his tone sharpening. "You're a danger on the road. That kind of negligence, it kills people." Her chest tightened. She wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself. But years of experience had taught her that some battles weren't worth fighting, not here. Not now. Not with a man who had already made up his mind. "I understand," she said softly. He nodded, as if her compliance confirmed something he already believed. He walked back to his patrol car, and Evelyn sat in the stillness, listening to the rain, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her like a heavy coat. Minutes passed. 5. 10. When he returned, he held a citation in his hand. He didn't hand it to her right away. Instead, he leaned against her door, his posture casual, almost mocking. "That'll be a $7,000 fine," he said. Evelyn's breath caught. 7,000? Reckless driving. Faulty equipment. Endangerment. He rattled off the charges like he was reading a grocery list. "You can contest it in court if you want, but I'd advise against it. Judges don't look kindly on people who waste their time." Her vision blurred. $7,000. She didn't have 700. She had rent due in a week. She had her daughter's textbooks to pay for. She had groceries to buy, gas to put in the tank, a life that was already stretched so thin it could snap at any moment. "Sir, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. I can't afford that. I didn't do anything wrong." He shrugged. "That's not my problem." And in that moment, as the rain fell and the world blurred around her, Evelyn Parker realized that this wasn't just about a traffic stop, that it was about something much deeper, that something much crueler. Part 1. The SCTUP. Evelyn Parker had never imagined her life would look like this. There had been dreams once, big, beautiful dreams. Dreams of becoming a teacher, of standing in front of a classroom and shaping young minds. Dreams of a house with a garden, of Sunday dinners with family, of a life that felt full and warm and safe. But life, as it often does, had other plans. She was 19 when she got pregnant. The father, a boy she'd loved with the reckless intensity of youth, had disappeared before their daughter was born. Her parents, strict and unforgiving, had turned their backs on her. And so, alone and terrified, Evelyn had done the only thing she could do. She survived. She took a job cleaning offices at night, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors while the world slept. She rocked her baby daughter in a studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet. She learned to stretch a dollar, to make a meal out of nothing, to smile even when her body ached and her heart felt heavy. And she raised her daughter Maya with everything she had. Maya was 20 now, a junior at the State University, studying biology with dreams of becoming a doctor. She was brilliant, kind, and determined. And every sacrifice Evelyn had ever made felt worth it when she looked into her daughter's eyes. But the sacrifices never stopped. That morning, Evelyn had woken at 5 a.m., the same as always. She dressed in the dim light of her bedroom, careful not to wake Maya, who was asleep on the pull-out couch in the living room. She'd made coffee in the ancient percolator that sputtered and hissed, and she'd packed a lunch she probably wouldn't have time to eat. Before leaving, she'd paused by the couch, looking down at her daughter's sleeping face. Maya looked peaceful, her features soft in the early morning light. Evelyn had brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and whispered a quiet prayer. Keep her safe. Keep her strong. Let her dreams come true. Then she slipped out into the cold, pre-dawn darkness and climbed into her car. The drive to her first job site was long 40 minutes, through winding back roads and stretches of highway where the world felt empty and endless. Evelyn didn't mind. She used the time to think, to plan, to remind herself why she kept going. But that morning, something felt different. The sky was darker than usual, heavy with clouds that promised rain. The road seemed quieter, lonelier. And as she merged onto the highway, a strange unease settled in her chest, a feeling she couldn't name. Couldn't shake. She turned on the radio, hoping for distraction. A gospel station played softly, the voices rising and falling in harmonies that felt like comfort. Like home. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Evelyn hummed along, her grip on the steering wheel relaxing slightly. She didn't see the patrol car until it was too late. It appeared behind her suddenly, lights flashing, siren wailing. Her heart lurched. She checked her speedometer. She wasn't speeding. She glanced at her mirrors. She hadn't done anything wrong. But the lights were for her. She pulled over, hands shaking, and waited. Part. TWO. The CONFLIC officer, Daniels, had been on the force for 12 years. And in that time, he'd learned a few things. People lied. People made excuses. People thought they were special, thought the rules didn't apply to them. And most of all, people didn't respect authority unless you made them. He'd pulled over hundreds of drivers speeding teenagers, drunk college kids, desperate men trying to talk their way out of tickets. And he'd learned to read them quickly, to know who would cooperate and who would give him trouble. When he saw the old Honda Civic drifting slightly in its lane, he'd made a decision. This one was getting a ticket. He'd followed her for a mile, watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. And when she changed lane signaling, yes, but not quite soon enough for his liking, he'd flipped on his lights. Now, standing beside her car, looking down at this woman with tired eyes and trembling hands, he felt nothing, not sympathy, not guilt, just the cold satisfaction of doing his job. $7,000, he repeated, watching her face crumble. Sir, please, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't have that kind of money. I didn't do anything wrong. I signaled. You think everyone who gets pulled over thinks they did something wrong? He interrupted. You think you're special? Evelyn flinched. No, sir. What? You just thought you could drive however you wanted. Ignore the rules? I didn't sign here. He thrust the citation toward her, his pen hovering impatiently. Evelyn stared at the paper, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. $7,000. It might as well have been $7 million. Her hand shook as she took the pen. This isn't right, she whispered. Officer Daniels's jaw tightened. Sign the paper. She did. And as he walked back to his car, leaving her sitting there in the rain, Evelyn Parker felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hopelessness. Part 3. The hysteria. Jolieveland didn't move for a long time. She sat in her car, the citation clutched in her lap, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The rain had turned into a downpour, hammering against the windshield, blurring the world outside into streaks of gray and shadow. $7,000. She said the number aloud, testing it, hoping that somehow it would sound less impossible. It didn't. Her rent was $1,200 a month. Her daughter's textbooks had cost $300 last semester. Groceries, gas, utilities, every dollar was accounted for, stretched as far as it could go. There was no savings account, no emergency fund, no safety net. She thought about calling her supervisor, explaining why she'd be late. But what would she say? That she'd been pulled over? That she couldn't afford the fine? That her entire life was unraveling because of a taillight she didn't even know was out? No, she'd go to work. She'd clean the offices, mop the floors, empty the trash cans. She'd do her job, just like always, because that's what she did. That's who she was. But first, she had to get herself together. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the way her mother had taught her years ago. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow. Steady. You are not broken, she told herself. You are bent, but you are not broken. She opened her eyes, started the car, and pulled back onto the highway. The rest of the drive passed in a haze. She barely remembered arriving at the office building, parking in the back lot, unlocking the service entrance with her key. The familiar smell of industrial cleaner and stale coffee greeted her, grounding her slightly. She changed into her work uniform, a simple gray polo and black pants, and tied her hair back. Then she got to work. She vacuumed the carpets in the executive offices, wiped down the conference room tables, scrubbed the bathrooms until they gleamed. She worked methodically, her hands moving on autopilot, her mind elsewhere. She thought about Maya, asleep in their apartment, unaware of what had happened. She thought about the citation sitting in her purse, a ticking time bomb. She thought about Officer Daniels and the cold, indifference in his eyes. And she thought about God. Evelyn had been raised in the church, had grown up singing hymns and memorizing Bible verses. But somewhere along the way, between the heartbreak and the exhaustion, her faith had become complicated. She still believed. She still prayed. But sometimes, in her darkest moments, she wondered if God was listening. Why? She wanted to ask, why me? Haven't I suffered enough? But she didn't ask, because deep down, she knew that faith wasn't about asking why. It was about trusting that there was a reason, even when you couldn't see it. By the time she finished her shift, The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Evelyn stood in the parking lot, looking up at the light, and felt something shift inside her. She didn't know how she was going to pay the fine. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing. She wasn't giving up. Part 4. The turning point. 3 days later, Evelyn received a notice in the mail. Her court date had been set. She had 2 weeks to either pay the fine in full or appear before a judge to contest the citation. She stared at the letter, her stomach twisting. 2 weeks. Maya found her sitting at the kitchen table, the letter clutched in her hands. "Mom?" she asked, concern etched across her face. "What's wrong?" Evelyn tried to smile, tried to brush it off. "Nothing, baby. Just ... Some paperwork?" But Maya wasn't fooled. She'd seen that look before, the look her mother wore when things were bad, when the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. She sat down across from her. "Tell me." And so, Evelyn did. She told her about the traffic stop, about Officer Daniels, about the $7,000 fine. She told her about the fear, the helplessness, the sense that the system was designed to crush people like her. Maya listened, her expression hardening with each word. "That's insane," she said when Evelyn finished. "He can't do that. It's not legal. We need to fight this." "With what money?" Evelyn asked quietly. "We can't afford a lawyer." "Then we'll represent ourselves. We'll go to court. We'll tell the judge what happened." Evelyn shook her head. "You think the judge will care? You think he'll believe me over a police officer?" "He has to." But even as Maya said it, they both knew the truth. The system didn't work for people like them. Still, Maya refused to give up. She spent the next week researching, printing out legal documents, preparing a defense. She coached her mother on what to say, how to present herself, how to stay calm and composed. And Evelyn, despite her fear, began to hope maybe, just maybe, this would work out. Part 5. The act of kindness, or so your age. A courtroom was cold and austere, with high ceilings and wooden benches that creaked under the weight of anxious bodies. Evelyn sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Maya sat beside her, squeezing her hand. "You've got this," she whispered. When Evelyn's name was called, she stood on shaky legs and walked to the front of the room. The judge, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a stern expression, looked down at her from his bench. "Miss Parker," he said, his voice echoing in the silence, "you're here to contest a citation for reckless driving and faulty equipment. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you understand that Officer Daniels has submitted a full report detailing the incident?" "Yes, Your Honor." "All right. Let's hear your side." Evelyn took a breath, steadying herself. She thought about everything Maya had taught her, everything she'd practiced. But when she opened her mouth, she didn't recite legal jargon or cite traffic codes. She simply told the truth. She told the judge about her life, about working nights to support her daughter, about the car that was barely holding together, about the traffic stop that had felt wrong from the start. She told him about Officer Daniels' coldness, his refusal to listen, his demand for a fine she couldn't possibly pay. And then she said something that surprised even herself. "Your Honor, I'm not here because I think I'm above the law. I'm here because I believe in fairness. And what happened to me that day? That wasn't fair. That was cruelty disguised as justice." The courtroom was silent. The judge studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Officer Daniels, who was sitting stiffly in the back row. "Officer, would you like to respond?" Daniels stood, his face flushed. "Your Honor, everything in my report is accurate. Ms. Parker was driving recklessly. The fine is justified." "Is it?" The judge asked, his tone neutral. $7,000 for a broken taillight and an alleged unsafe lane change? She endangered other drivers. Did she? Or did you see an opportunity to write a ticket and took it? Daniels' jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The judge sighed. I'm reducing the fine to $200. Ms. Parker, you'll have 30 days to pay. Case dismissed. Evelyn's knees nearly buckled with relief. $200. She could manage that as she left the courtroom. Maya threw her arms around her, tears streaming down her face. You did it. Mom, you really did it. But Evelyn wasn't thinking about the reduced fine. She was thinking about the look on Officer Daniels's face as she'd walked past him. It wasn't anger. It was shame. Part 6. The realization. Officer Daniels sat in his patrol car that night, staring at nothing. The hearing had been hours ago, but he couldn't stop replaying it in his mind. The way Evelyn Parker had stood before the judge, her voice steady despite her fear. The way she'd looked at him not with anger, but with something worse. Disappointment. He single quotes deep in a cop for 12 years. He'd written hundreds of tickets, made dozens of arrests. He'd always thought of himself as one of the good ones, firm but fair, doing his job to keep people safe. But as he sat there in the dark, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong. He thought about Evelyn's words in the courtroom. That wasn't fair. That was cruelty disguised as justice. Was she right? He thought about the way he'd treated her during the traffic stop, dismissive, cold, unwilling to listen. He thought about the $7,000 fine, the way her face had crumbled when he'd told her. And he thought about his own life. He had a wife, 2 kids, a comfortable house in the suburbs. He didn't know what it was like to scrape by, to work nights just to keep the lights on, to feel the weight of the world pressing down with no relief in sight. He judged Evelyn Parker without knowing her, without caring. And that realization made him feel sick. Part 7. Redemption or Forge IV&S. 2 weeks later, Evelyn was leaving her shift at the office building when she saw him. Officer Daniels was standing beside her car, his hands in his pockets, his expression uncertain. Her first instinct was fear. But as she got closer, she saw something in his eyes that stopped her. Regret. Ms. Parker, he said quietly. I wanted to apologize. Evelyn said nothing, waiting. I was wrong, he continued, his voice thick. The way I treated you, it wasn't right. You didn't deserve that. And I'm sorry. She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity. She found it. Why now? She asked softly. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you said in court, about cruelty disguised as justice. And you were right. I was cruel. I didn't see you as a person. I just saw someone to write a ticket. Evelyn's throat tightened. Do you know what it's like? She said, her voice trembling. To work every day of your life and still feel like you're drowning? To do everything right and still be treated like you're nothing? No, he admitted. I don't. Then maybe, she said gently, you should remember that. The next time you pull someone over, the next time you have the power to show mercy. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I will. I promise. And in that moment, something shifted. Evelyn reached into her purse and pulled out the $200 fine, already paid. She held it out to him. I forgive you, she said. Officer Daniels' breath hitched. Thank you, he whispered. And as he drove away, Evelyn stood in the parking lot, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Because forgiveness, she realized, wasn't just a gift to the person who'd wronged you. It was a gift to yourself. Part 8. Moral ending. 3 months later, Evelyn received a letter in the mail. It was from Officer Daniels. Inside was a check for $7,000, the original fine amount, and a note that read, Miss Parker, I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. Please use this to help your daughter with school or for anything else you need. You deserve so much more than the world has given you. Thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like." Officer J. Daniels Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, tears streaming down her face, and thought about the journey she'd been on. It hadn't been easy. It had been painful, unfair, and at times unbearable. But through it all, she'd held on to her grace, her dignity, her humanity. And in the end, that had been enough. She thought about Officer Daniels, and how one moment of cruelty had transformed into a lifetime lesson. She thought about Maya, studying late into the night, chasing her dreams, and she thought about herself, a woman who had every reason to be bitter, to be angry, to give up. But instead, she had chosen kindness. Because kindness, Evelyn knew, was the only thing powerful enough to break the hardest of hearts. And in a world that so often felt cold and cruel, that was a kind of magic all its own.